As soon as I walk into the lobby, I can see my friends standing in the exact same place as yesterday. I walk over to them, and the moment Ty sees me, he turns around wearing an annoyed expression. Dude, I was texting you last night asking about what happened with Mr. Porter. Why didn't you text me back? He asks me. Clearly, that ticked him off, and I feel bad about that. The truth is that when I got home, I saw his texts, but after the day I had, I really didn't feel like telling him what Mr. Porter had said to me. I wasn't going to tell him that though, so instead, I lie and say, "Sorry man, the reception at my place was really bad last night. I didn't get your text until this morning." The four of them briefly exchange a look as if they're having a silent conversation. I figure that none of them believe me, but they decide not to call me out on it. Finally, Jake asks, "So what did happen with Mr. Porter?" I decide that I might as well tell them the truth. "Well, I got called down to the office where I had to wait for like an hour until he was ready to meet with me." "Why did you have to wait so long?" Luke asks. "It looked like he had a meeting with some guy from the school board, I think." I decide not to tell them about the military impersonator because considering how angry the guy made Mr. Porter, I assume he really didn't want people to find out about their meeting. Anyway, I continue. When I finally talked to Mr. Porter, he basically said that if I get into one more fight, I'll be suspended. They all look shocked. Chris is the first one to speak up. "But you're the guy who's getting beat up. Why would he suspend you?" "Kind of glad you asked. Mr. Porter talked to a bunch of people from my bus when he heard about what had happened, and they all told him that I hit Mike first and he was just defending himself. They all stare at me like I had suddenly burst into flames. Nothing I told him mattered after that because he was convinced that I was the one who started not just that particular fight, but basically every other fight that we've been in. So then he told me that I have to go see the guidance counselor after school or else he'll suspend me." The four of them look at me with a mixture of disbelief and pity. "It sounds like he really wants to suspend you," Luke says to break the silence. "You don't say," I respond while shaking my head in annoyance. Jake puts his hand on my shoulder and says, "Listen man, if that's the case, then you're really going to have to try and ignore Mike if he says something to you. If you don't, then he gets exactly what he wants. You understand?" I can feel the picture of my father growing heavier in my back pocket as I think back to the promise I made while holding it this morning. Even though I had already decided that from now on I'll ignore Mike, it's nice to hear that my friends care enough to tell me that. "Yeah, don't worry man, I'll put my pride aside and ignore him," I say. Before my friends have a chance to ask me anything else, I look up at the clock and see that we only have a few minutes left before first period starts. "Alright guys, I'm gonna head to my locker," I tell them. As the four of them begin to head to their lockers as well, Ty says to me, 10-4 man, and don't forget to meet us here after second period so we can head to the deli for lunch." "Will do," I reply as I start walking towards my locker. After I grab my books out of my locker, I head for my English class. I have English for my first period class today instead of gym because every second day, the order of our classes switch. As I sit down at my desk, I can't help but dread the thought of being forced to listen to our teacher recite Shakespeare for the entire class once again. Luckily, today we actually end up writing our own poems, which makes the time fly by. Although a lot of kids in the class were having trouble with their poetry, I feel like I was doing pretty well. It turns out I'm a poet and I wasn't even aware of it. Once English class ends, I walk down to the gym and hope that we aren't playing basketball again today. As a matter of fact, we're actually doing something a whole lot worse. Today, our teacher is making us do the beep test, which is an endurance test that pits every student against each other so that the entire class can see who is in the best and worst shape. Every student in the class lines up at one end of the gym, and every time we hear a beep, we have to run to the other end of the gym before the next beep. The test starts off pretty easy, but the beeps get progressively faster, and within minutes, I can feel myself breathing heavily. I end up not doing very well in the test and only getting a score of 5, with the class average being around an 8 and the best score being a 12. Needless to say, my gym teacher is not very happy with my performance, and I know that he'll give me a bad grade. I have no idea who thought it was a good idea to give students grades based on their athletic abilities, since students who play sports and have good genetics have a huge advantage over everyone else. But that's the education system for you. When I walked out of the locker room after gym, I'm in a bad mood because of how I did on the beep test. However, that mood quickly changes when I realize that I now get to head off grounds with my friends for lunch, and then last period, I would get to work on my French project with Tessa. I'm certain that the worst part of my day is over. After I put my gym clothes in my locker, I walk into the lobby and find Ty, Chris, Jake, and Luke standing in their usual spot. Together, we walk out of the school and down a sidewalk that is full of other groups of kids from our school also heading off grounds for lunch. After walking for a few minutes, we slow down as we pass a broken chain link fence leading to the back of a convenience store. A lot of kids like to cut through this way since it's a shortcut to the popular deli close to our school where a lot of students go for lunch. However, most of the druggies at our school love to hang out behind the convenience store, so we decide to take the long way around. My friends and I finally arrive at the deli, along with what seems like half of the entire school. The line of students all waiting to order their lunch is out the door of the small deli, but since we don't have time to head anywhere else, we wait, hoping the line will move along quickly. After about half an hour, we finally get to the front of the line and I can see the Chinese family who owns the place running around frantically making sandwiches and working the cash. The four of them clearly unprepared for this many people at once. The young man who ends up making my sandwich wears a name tag that says Bob. Although I don't think the name suits him very well, he does make a mean sandwich. The five of us sit down at one of the few empty tables and eat quickly because we know we're running late. As we hurriedly exit the deli, I can almost hear the owners sigh with relief that the lunch rush from hell is finally over. We only walk for a few minutes before realizing that there is no way we can make it back to school in time for third period if we take the long way around. So we decide to take the shortcut behind the convenience store in order to save time. We quickly walk across the store's quiet parking lot, and as we come around the back of the store, I notice three guys standing behind the building. All three of them seem to be smoking and talking to one another, not really paying us any attention. However, as we get a bit closer, I see that one of the guys is noticeably taller than the other two. It isn't until he slightly turns his face to talk to the guy standing on his left that I recognize who this guy is. Mike. Mike is literally the last person on the face of the earth who I want to see standing in front of me right now. I stop dead in my tracks when I recognize him, which causes my friends to also stop and look at me curiously. It doesn't take them long to realize why I stopped walking. Dude, isn't that Mike? Chris asks me. I don't answer right away because I don't want to believe that it's really him. As I'm trying to figure out what I should say, Jake walks up to me and puts his arm over my shoulder. Guys, we're going to take the road, he says, and then lightly pulls me the other way without waiting for a response. Ty, Chris, and Luke all turn and begin walking the other way. Instead of just keeping quiet and letting Jake lead me away from Mike, I shrug his arm off me. No, let's just keep going, I tell my friends. They all turn back around and look at me with concern. Josh, that's Mike up there, Ty says. Yeah, and? I reply. And if you get into another fight with him, then you'll be suspended, Jake finishes. A part of me knows that the smartest decision is to listen to Jake, but I also realize that I'm going to have to face Mike eventually. I can't avoid him forever, especially since we take the same bus. So now is as good a time as any to prove to myself and my friends that I'm able to ignore whatever he says to me and walk away. I look at each one of my friends and then turn around to glance over at Mike, who finally seems to notice us and is trying to figure out what we are doing. Look, I'm well aware that if I fight Mike, I'll be suspended. But don't worry, no matter what he says to me, I'm going to ignore him and keep walking. Plus, if we go the long way now, then we're going to end up super late, so we might as well just keep going. My friends look at one another, trying to figure out if listening to me is the right thing to do. Instead of waiting for them to make up their minds, I turn around and begin heading towards Mike. After walking a few paces, I turn around and see that my friends are following close behind me. I'm beyond grateful that they're here with me to encourage me to just keep walking, because if they weren't, I'm not sure if I would be able to just walk past Mike. Well, would you look who it is, Twiggy and the homos, Mike says as soon as we're within earshot. Usually, I would immediately say something back to Mike for calling my friends homos. However, I know that's just what he wants, so I don't even look at him. Just ignore him, just ignore him, just ignore him. Not talking to me, are you, Twig? Mike continues, determined to get me to say something back. Oh, that's right. If I kick your ass again, then you'll be suspended. Just ignore him, just ignore him, just ignore him. Well, that's too bad, because if you're not around, then who else am I going to beat up every day? My friends and I pass him and continue walking towards the opening in the fence. Mike is getting under my skin enough to make me fantasize about punching him in the face, but I'm able to ignore these thoughts and keep walking. He must realize that he isn't getting to me though, because he plays his last card. So, Twig, who was that fat girl you were drooling over in the computer room? I stop. My friends keep walking for a few more strides before realizing that I had stopped. They all turn around and I can see that they're silently telling me to keep walking, but I remain frozen in place. Even though I had my back to him, I could tell that Mike was smiling behind me because he finally knows what to say to get my attention. "Oh, Twiggy," he continues. "You know she doesn't actually like you, right?" He's finally starting to piss me off. "She's only spending time with you because she feels sorry for you." I can hear him and his friends moving closer to me, but I just stare straight ahead, rooted in place, and weigh my options. If I fought him, would Mr. Porter find out? Would Mike go to the office and tell him? Probably. But I mean, the real reason why I can't get into another fight is so my mom won't find out. However, judging from our conversation this morning, she is going to discover all the fights I've been in anyway, so is there any real point in ignoring Mike? Just as I'm about to convince myself that it's fine to fight Mike, I remember my dad's picture in my back pocket. I think back to the promise I made to him this morning, and I know that I can't fight Mike, no matter how much he deserves a good punch in the face. The same thing goes for these so-called friends of yours, Mike tells me. He gets so close to me that I can smell the cigarettes off him. It takes every ounce of self-control that I have not to turn around and punch him. "Alright, come on, Mike, that's enough," Chris says, trying to sound tough. He takes a step towards me, but Mike's friends walk over and stand in front of him, causing Chris to stop. Mike keeps talking like nothing happened. "These guys aren't really your friends. They just hang out with you so that you have something to live for." "Shut the hell up, Mike," I tell him, his words finally bothering me enough that I say something. He chuckles a bit and then says, "But they actually hate being around you because all you are is a sympathy case. So why don't you do them and everyone else a favor and kill yourself just like your daddy did?" As soon as he says this, all thoughts of reason vanish from my head and are replaced by pure anger. Mike could have said anything he wanted about me and I would have been able to ignore him, but he does not get to talk about my father like that. With my fists clenched tightly and my entire body shaking with rage, I turn around and punch him in the face as hard as I can. I watch as he stumbles back, holding his hand to his mouth. It feels incredibly satisfying to hit him after listening to him insult me and my father. However, that feeling doesn't last very long because Mike recovers quickly. He spits in the dirt near my feet and holds up his fists, ready for a fight. I do the same. He throws his first punch, aiming for my face, and my reflexes take over. I block his punch with my left arm and quickly counter with a right hook to his ribs. I begin to feel confident when my hit actually lands, but that confidence instantly crumbles when Mike's expression tells me that he barely felt the punch. Mike tries to punch me in the face, but I'm able to duck at the last second and dodge it. I try to move back into position as quickly as possible, but I'm still too slow to see his next hit coming. He throws a right uppercut that connects with my chin and sends me stumbling backwards. The hit even manages to knock my glasses off my face. And although I don't see where they land, I think I hear one of the lenses break. As I try to recover, I can hear Mike's friends cheering and shouting insults at me. I look over to see them standing in front of my friends, who watch me and yell words of encouragement. I'm relieved that they aren't trying to get involved because they would just end up getting their asses kicked too. I turn my attention back to Mike, who is smiling confidently. "Thanks for the bruise, Twig," he says. Although I have no idea what he's talking about, I don't let his comment distract me. I step towards him and throw a low left hook, hoping to connect with his ribs. Mike easily dodges it and counters by punching me right in the face with a left jab, followed immediately by a right hook that hits me in the side of the head. His two punches are devastating. The first hit gets me right in the left eye, and I can feel it swell up almost instantly. The second hit is even worse, and disorients me so much that I struggle to stay on my feet. As I try to recover from the hits, Mike reaches out and grips my left shoulder with his hand. He leans in and says, "Nice try, Twig, but you are, and always will be, just a skinny, weak pussy. Enjoy your suspension." With his free hands, Mike punches me as hard as he can in the gut, knocking the wind out of me. I immediately fall to my knees, gasping for air. Before I can even catch my breath, Mike walks over and kicks me in the ribs, causing me to fall to the ground coughing. I look up at him, unable to stop coughing. I can taste blood coming out of my bottom lip, and my left eye is now swollen shut. Mike looks completely uninjured except for the small bruise on his cheek. He stands over me triumphantly, and I expect him to say something, but he just smiles and gives me the finger. He casually walks away with his two friends following closely behind. I can still hear the three of them laughing at me long after they'd left. After not moving off the ground for a few minutes, I finally managed to catch my breath. So I crawl over to the wall of the convenience store and sit down with my back against it. My friends walk over to me. "Well, that was something," Ty says, breaking the silence. I don't respond, mainly because I'm not sure if I can, but I also don't really know what to say to my friends. They're all just standing in front of me awkwardly and looking at me with pity. Finally, Jake decides to speak up. Are you okay? He asks me in a low voice. I spit out a bit of blood and then wipe my mouth with the back of my arm. I'm fine, I tell him, even though I'm obviously not fine. As Jake looks away, unsure of what to say next, I start thinking back to the fight. After every boxing match, my father used to make me reflect on everything that happened in the fight in my head. Every move I made, every move my opponent made, and every move I should have made. It had become so routine over the years that I started doing it when Mike and I got into fights as well. As I think about our fight, there's one thing that I can't make sense of. Mike was taunting me to get me to throw a punch, so he should have been ready when I clocked him in the face. What I can't figure out is why he didn't dodge my punch instead of letting me make contact. I mean, why would anyone want to get intentionally punched in the face? Shit. I say out loud as the truth hits me. What? Chris asks. I kept wondering why Mike didn't dodge that first punch I threw. Because it was an awesome punch that he definitely did not see coming? Luke claims, trying to make me feel better. No, it was a sloppy punch that Helen Keller could have seen coming. I counter. Luke doesn't respond, obviously done trying to cheer me up. I continue. Anyway, he took that punch to the face to get a bruise on his cheek so that he could prove to Mr. Porter that we fought and that I threw the first punch. Then when Mr. Porter sees that I'm all bruised and bloody, he'll get all the proof he needs and I'll be suspended. The four of them slowly look at each other, realizing that what I'm saying must be true. Well, what do we do? Ty asks me. I think for a minute. You guys should head back to school and try to make it seem like everything is normal because I'm sure Mr. Porter will come looking for you. I'll sneak in the side door once you guys go in and try not to be seen by him or any teachers who might ask questions. They all nod. That's a good idea, Jake says, but he'll eventually call you out of class. I think this over. Then I won't be in class. He can't suspend me if I'm not in school, and it'll give me time to think of what to do. But if you're not in school, then you'll miss your appointment with the guidance counselor and he'll suspend you anyway, Jake responds. I slap the wall behind me in frustration. Look, I just got beat up a few minutes ago, and it's kind of hard to think clearly. If I come back to meet with the counselor, then Mr. Porter will be waiting there to suspend me. And if I don't, then he'll also suspend me. It's a no goddamn win situation. My friends try to think of something helpful to say, but I can tell that they are struggling to come up with anything. Look, guys, I really just need to be alone right now to think, okay? I say, sounding more annoyed than I mean to. Yeah, sure, man. We understand. Jake quickly responds, looking a bit hurt. But if you're going into the school, you might want something to hide your injuries. He tosses me his hoodie. I had forgotten mine this morning due to the argument with my mom. Thank you, I say gratefully. As they start to leave, Chris stops and bends down, picking something up off the ground. As he walks back over to me, I see that he found my glasses. Here, dude, he says as he hands them to me. I'm relieved to have them back because my blurred vision is starting to give me a headache. Or maybe that's just the result of being punched in the face too many times. Regardless, I examine my glasses and see that the left lens is broken. Luckily, I always keep an extra lens in my locker, so I put my glasses in my pocket for now. Thanks, man, I tell Chris. He nods at me before jogging ahead to join Jake, Ty, and Luke. I watch the four of them walk down the road for a few paces before realizing just how late they are, so they start running towards the school. As soon as they're out of sight, I put on Jake's hoodie and begin walking with my head down. A few minutes later, I enter the side door of the school about 5 minutes after classes started. I had assumed that the hallways would be empty, but there are still lots of students hanging out by their lockers. A few of the nicer teachers didn't mind if students were a few minutes late to their class, so most kids took full advantage of the extra time. I'm actually glad that there's still a fair amount of students walking through the halls because it'll make it easier for me to get to my locker unnoticed. As I walk through the halls as normally as possible, I make sure to keep my hood up so that nobody is able to see my face or my injuries. On my way to my locker, I have to walk past the front office, so I quickly glance up to see if Mike is still in there talking to Mr. Porter. Instead, I see Jake, Chris, Ty, and Luke all waiting to be called into Mr. Porter's office. Seeing my four friends sitting there worries me, but I know that each one of these guys would lie to Mr. Porter to keep me from getting suspended. I just hope they won't get punished for protecting me. When I finally reach my locker, I decide that my best option is to leave the school as fast as I can and walk home. If I stayed at school, then someone would eventually notice my injuries and send me to the office. So I really don't have any other choice. Plus, it'll give me some time to think of what to say to Mr. Porter when I'm back in school tomorrow. I shove my books into my bag as quickly as possible without looking suspicious. Then I look around for any teachers before pulling out my phone to check the time. My school is oddly strict on cell phone use, and teachers are allowed to take any student's cell phones that they see without warning. Most kids don't want to risk getting their phones taken away, so they either leave them in their lockers or keep them turned off in their pockets. After I put my phone back in my pocket, I reach into my locker and find the spare lens for my glasses. As I begin replacing it with the damaged one, someone walks up behind me.
Hey Josh, are you heading to class?
I turn my head slightly to see Tessa standing there. My heart begins pounding in my chest as panic sets in because Tessa is the last person I want to see right now. Luckily, I have my back to her, so she still can't see my injuries, and I intend to keep it that way. I definitely don't want her to know that I had just gotten beat up while trying to fight Mike. Actually, I say, trying to sound as normal and uninjured as possible, I'm not feeling very well, so I'm heading home. I managed to finish replacing the lens in my glasses, so I put them on. Wearing my glasses helps me see everything so much clearer, including the look of concern on Tessa's face. Seeing her look so worried about me makes me feel even worse about lying to her.
Okay, that's fine.
She says.
I hope you feel better.
Thanks, I respond as I close my locker. As soon as I do, I instinctively turn and look at her. Before I can realize my mistake, Tessa catches a glimpse of my black eye and fat lip, and her expression immediately changes from concern to horror. She puts a hand over her mouth and gasps.
Oh my god, Josh!
She says.
What the hell happened?
I quickly look around to see if anyone heard her outburst. Fortunately, the hall is now pretty well empty. Nothing, okay? I tell her while trying to figure out a way to get out of this conversation as quickly as possible. However, Tessa isn't going to let this go, and it doesn't take her long to figure out what had happened to me.
That guy you were looking at when we were in the computer room yesterday, Mike something I think his name is. Did he do this to you?
I begin to grow even more anxious because the longer I stand here, the higher the chance I have of Mr. Porter or some other teacher seeing me. Look, Tessa, I say, I really appreciate the concern, but I have to go. I start heading down the hallway towards the side door. Tessa follows me.
So you're not going to tell the principal and get that guy suspended?
She asks. I stop walking towards the door when I realize that, being the nice person she is, Tessa will probably tell Mr. Porter that I got beat up by Mike, thinking she's helping me. But if she does that, she'll prove to Mr. Porter that I got into another fight. So I have to tell her the truth. She stares at me as I turn around and pull my hood down to reveal the extent of the injuries on my face. I look at her with my one good eye. Tessa, listen. I begin, trying to figure out the best way to tell her what happened. I got into a fight with Mike. He beat the crap out of me, and then he went and told Mr. Porter that I was the one who started the fight, even though it's not true. If you go to the office and tell Mr. Porter that you saw me, then he's going to suspend me, not Mike. So please, don't tell anyone you saw me, okay? It's difficult to read her expression, but I figure that she's probably disappointed in me. She nods anyway. Good, thank you. I put my hood back up and walk to the door. Tessa just stands there and watches me go, which makes me feel even more terrible. As I walk out the door, I look back to see Tessa walking in the opposite direction with her head down. More than anything, I want to run back inside and tell her that I'm sorry she had to see me like this. That this only happened because Mike was an asshole who insulted my dead father to get me to fight him. But I don't run back inside. Instead, I keep walking away from the school, thinking about how the girl I like now wants nothing to do with me. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this chapter, then please remember to leave a like on the video and subscribe to my channel. New episodes of Strength drop on Tuesdays and Fridays, but if you'd like to see the chapters early and support the channel for only $5 a month, then head on over to my Patreon page. Link is in the description. Also, you can purchase the full paperback novel on my website if you're in Canada, or on Amazon if you live outside of Canada. Thanks again, and I'll be back in a few days with the next episode.